Okay, thank you, and good morning to everybody. We're going to have a little bit of a look at this. It's a fairly simple theme, and it finishes off with just a really nice little video that goes for about 9 or 10 minutes. And it is about the beauty that God has put into all of his creation. We know that it's actually really easy for us to find some things that we think are really beautiful. We're just going to have a look at a couple of little pictures. Just part of God's creation that we have a look, and we look at the flowers, and of course we look at the other animals, and these days we're able to look at them more closely, and the closer we look, the more amazed we are. And the more we find out about how all of the processes work, you know, all of the systems that are in our body, all of those things, we are amazed, and we become convinced very, very quickly that these things couldn't have come about just by accident. We've got, for a number of people, their favourite beautiful things, and it might be things like the butterflies, and about the colours that are on the wings. And as a physics teacher, I actually find it immensely interesting just about how those colours are produced, because they're not coloured in. It's actually to do with the play of light on the surfaces and the thin films that are on all of these things, and how the play of colour then happens, and things change a little bit depending on the angle that you're looking at, and so many things in God's creation. We find some other things in the varieties of colour. Now you might know some people that can puff their cheeks like that, I don't really know. And some are just show-offs, aren't they? You look at that one, it's like, ta-da! They're just show-offs. But then you have a look at the colour, and you just look at everything about them, other than mating and then, you know, eating their mate, something or other like that. But you have a look at it, and it's just fascinating to have a look at. Back in Genesis, we know that God had a look at the things that he had made, and he was pretty pleased with himself. He thought, I don't mind that, I don't mind that, I like that, and I like that. He saw everything, and it was very good. Not just good, it was very good. Now, by contrast, there are some things that we might think don't look so beautiful. This actually reminded me of Greg Congrave's dog, Winnie. So we put that one in there. Now, there's other things that we actually, for ourselves, for what we think, we wouldn't actually sort of put them on the list of being, oh, look how beautiful they are. I wish I had one of those as a pet at home. A Jimmy Durante. Now, the poor old blobfish, you pull it out of the water, it lives way down deep. And then it comes up, and it's actually because of the low pressure, the whole poor thing sort of swells up and everything. And, you know, it looks like it's been stung by bees or whatever else has happened to it. It doesn't actually look like that when it's down deep. So it suffered a fair bit of abuse. Yeah, it reminds me of several relatives, but anyway. Now, you wouldn't want that running around your house, would you? Now, his mum thought he was beautiful. Yeah, and wanted to show pictures to all her friends. You get some things that are just sort of big, you know, blob-like things, and we think, no, they're not the things that we think of as being beautiful. Need a bit of dental work. And you look at some things and you just sort of think, well, if I was thinking of things beautiful, I wouldn't think of them. Again, his mum thought it was really, really good, you know, sort of looked a bit like Uncle Fred, and, you know, sort of like family resemblances were there. So just a couple of things there. Somebody, one little child asked at one time, did God really mean to make him look like that? But, you know, there's some things, we wouldn't want to be caught with some expressions in the photographs, would we? We wouldn't want that to be the case. So we'll go back to some of the more beautiful things, just a couple. In Ecclesiastes in chapter 3, he said he's actually made everything beautiful in its time. In a particular context, all of these things are actually really, really beautiful. And for people who go in and they do studies of all, just about every type of animal, every species, everything that's around, and they come back just in wonder. It might be something that we think that's the ugliest thing I've ever seen, and they have a look and they want to say, oh, no. You need to know this about this animal. This is actually amazing. The place that it's able to live, the thing it's able to survive through, and they find all the good things. Another thing that is beautiful is what God's done for us. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3 there it says, he's also planted eternity in the human heart. So that sense of divine purpose. So a longing which nothing under the sun can satisfy except God. And God left a whole heap of things to make us wonder about him. We know the scriptures also talk about when we look at the heavens and we see the works of God. We see things that are above us and things that we could never actually create. So the question is beauty an accident? Now we know the whole evolutionary story where they say, it's time and chance and just accidental processes and mutations and various things that we've ended up with something of non-life, somehow all decided to get together, or let's see if we can make something a little bit better out of all of this. And we don't believe that that's the case at all. When we have a look and see the things of beauty, there's something that actually even Charles Darwin, we'll see in a moment, had difficulty with about why should there be beauty? It looks like there's beauty just for beauty's sake. I wanted to sort of go through a couple of the things that come up in the evolutionary type story and the things where people have tried to put to us and say, these things help to show and prove like evolution was the process. But we're going to look back after that and say just the fact of things being beautiful, actually that's evidence of God being there. So they're going to make the claim it has been proved that life could have emerged by chance in the primitive earth. Back in 1953, this fellow Miller, he went through an experiment and he got a heap of chemicals, put them together, heated them all up, zapped them with a bit of electricity, and they produced a couple of proteins, amino acids, that we might find as part of ourselves. Now, what happened in the newspapers, they said, Miller created life. He didn't create life at all. But people sort of thought, because they were so fixed on trying to get an explanation about where we all came from, they wanted to grab all of that and say, look how easy it is. If we make the right conditions, we'll put it all together and we'll get all the things that you need for a living organism. Even actually to have the chemicals you might need for a living organism, to actually get that to become a living organism is actually an impossibility. There are other people who said, evidence of evolution. The human embryo has gills. The human embryo has gills. This fellow, Haeckel, he produced a heap of diagrams to do the embryos of a whole heap of different animals. And he said, have a look at this. These actually look like they're all really essentially the same. And just a little variation on this, and we get then, they grow into all the different animals. And they said that's evidence that everything actually started in all exactly the same way. And of course, little changes here and there, so we ended up with the variety of everything that we see around about us. The American scientist said his biogenetic law said it's dead as a doornail. So scientific American scientists said that. So these are some of his pictures that he put, and you might actually even still find them in some textbooks. As they have a look at the fish and the salamander and turtle and chicken and rabbit and human, and look how much they're just the same as each other. Do you know what the problem was with everything he was talking about? Is he made up those pictures. He falsified the information. That's what the real embryos actually look like. But people were so desperate to push God out of the picture that they wanted to hold on to that. And so in Science, September the 5th, 1997, they published that article, the drawings were falsified. All the embryos actually different. So that one falls down as far as their evidence. The Archaeopteryx, a missing link between reptiles and birds. They said, here we go. We've got the missing link here that's going to explain a whole heap of things. We've got this here, we've got this something that looks like a bird, flies like a bird, but it's got all these reptilian features. It's got a claw on the wing. It's got some teeth. I was going to read a couple of things out to do with all of that. It turns out that they're saying that, this is what it was back then, and gradually we've got that transition from dinosaurs through to birds. Well, it turns out that even today, there are some birds that actually have a little claw on their wing. So ostrich, emu, plover, various ones, they have those things. But other people have said, yeah, but this one's got teeth. Now, birds don't have teeth. Now, it turns out the birds actually do have a gene that activates for teeth, but it has to be activated in there. So they can actually grow teeth. In 2006, the scientists at the University of Manchester and the University of Wisconsin, they managed to manipulate the genes for a chicken so it actually grew teeth. So some people are saying, the fact that this has had teeth, this sort of proves that this used to be a reptile. So it used to be a dinosaur. Well, it turns out even now that some birds have ridges or serrations in their beak, but most don't. Some reptiles have teeth, and some don't. So if you turn around and say, reptiles don't have teeth, so they're not reptiles anymore. Well, yes, they are. Some fish have teeth, and some don't. Some of you have teeth, and maybe some don't. But that's not a proof one way or another. No matter what the young people say, it doesn't mean that you used to be dinosaurs or you are now. These days, people don't so much push that as, actually, it's still going to be in a whole heap of textbooks, and people are going to say, have a look at this. This actually proves an evolutionary process, and people have really looked in it. It doesn't. The other thing is evolution of the horse has been proven by the fossil record. Well, when you went to school, you would have had in the biology books, you would have had all sorts of pictures to do with horses in the fossil record. And it turns out that all of that was just a made-up story. Some of the horses, actually they've got a whole heap of things that look a bit like horses, and they thought, they'll go from small and they become big eventually. Well, it turns out that some that they put sort of early in the sequence didn't actually appear till after some of those that were later in the sequence. And the people that are seriously interested in the whole story to do with evolution, the ones that are serious and actually knowledgeable, they don't use the horse as an example anymore. Living things possess vestigial organs. Now, they used to use that as an argument that, the fact that we have things in our body that we don't really need anymore, that sort of shows that, we're gradually evolving and the things that were there, they're sort of getting dropped off and we're sort of getting improvements all the way and so on. So things like at one time they talked about the appendix and the tonsils and the coccyx bone. We'll just read out about a couple of these things. The appendix In recent years, it's been shown that human appendix has lymphoid cells which help the body fight infections. So it suggests that the appendix has got a role in the immune system. The coccyx, or the tailbone that we have. So people say, oh, that used to be like, well, we're a little bit more ape-like and so on, and we needed that. But it plays a crucial role in the human body, serving as an attachment point for muscles and ligaments, supports the pelvic floor, and contributing to weight-bearing stability when sitting. The tonsils, they're part of the lymphatic system. They're crucial for the body's immune system, acting as a first line of defence against pathogens and so on. People used to say the pituitary gland, that used to be on the list. It's actually called the master gland in our body, but it plays a crucial role in regulating body functions, producing hormones that control growth, metabolism, reproduction, stress response, and a whole heap of other processes. People used to say that our body hair is just sort of something left over from our ape-like days. And you might find some people that it looks like they're still closer back there. I don't really know. But it's actually still there, and it serves for temperature regulation, protection, and sensory input to our body. Various things there. Do you know, at one time, there was a book that was written, and it had 200 vestigial organs in our body. They then gradually reduced it when they said, well, actually, this bit has a use, and this bit has a use, and this bit has a use. And do you know how many vestigial organs they could put into a book now? Zero. They're not there. Everything has its purpose. Oh, but some people turn around and say, oh, yes, but things like the tonsils, you can live without them. Well, yes. Well, other things you can live without. I can cut off your arm and you can live without it. Does that mean that it actually has no real purpose anymore? We would dismiss that straight out of hand, wouldn't we? What a silly thought. Oh, just because you can live without it means that you don't actually need it. Well, that's foolishness. There was a famous one, industrial melanism. Evidence of evolution. And this is all in the textbooks, and it's probably still in a heap of textbooks. And what they did was they a bit of an explanation. They said, oh, we can see evolution in process. Up there in England, where there's a whole heap of industries and all the pollution and all the trees, they're all getting dark on the surface. So that means that the dark moths can hide on there, and the light moths, they're going to get picked off. And so we're transitioning from, when it was all clean, there was all these, light-coloured moths, and the dark ones would stand out. And so we've got this transition that's happening. Oh, it's evolution in process. Well, no, it wasn't. What they actually did with these moths, as far as demonstrating that as a principle to people, they're a bit naughty in what they did. They actually pinned the moths to the tree trunk, took the picture, and then put their story to it. It turns out that these moths don't normally hang around there. They hide under the leaves. It wouldn't actually matter what colour they were under the leaves. Anyway, those things, that just doesn't stand up anymore. What we're going to do is have a look at a little video just to do with beauty and how that actually... So people have been desperate to find all these other ways to try to support an evolution story. The more people find out, and the greater the research that people do, they realise, oh, hang on, that part of their so-called evolutionary story just does not add up. We can have a look at any process that happens in the human body, and we'll perhaps do that another time. Things like blood clotting and things like eyesight and various things. And all the processes and the steps and the proteins and the different chemicals that are involved Unless everything was in there all at once, then you couldn't actually have anything of those processes working. But these people have had a look and they thought, beauty for beauty's sake. That's not something that comes out of the evolutionary story. So we'll just play this video. It goes for about 10 minutes, and then we'll finish off shortly after that.
There are at least 8 million different species of animals and plants. And for more than a century, the go-to explanation for their incredible diversity has been the theory of natural selection. Charles Darwin's hypothesis of gradual, undirected biological change has had enormous influence on both science and philosophy. Yet can a purely materialistic process actually account not only for the stunning variety of living organisms, but also for their extravagant beauty?
I think the place to start with natural selection and beauty is Darwin himself. He wrote once that every time he saw the tail of a peacock, it made him physically ill, sick to his stomach, because he's looking at something that goes well beyond what his theories, either of natural selection or sexual selection, can explain.
To better understand Darwin's concerns about beauty, peacocks, and their threat to his theory, let's take a closer look at those feathers.
You see the peacock's tail and you go, wow. It's a visual crescendo of symmetry, harmony, coordination among all the elements of the design. And the deeper you look, the more interesting it becomes.
An adult male peacock has, on average, about 200 individual tail feathers. 170 of them feature a decorative eye spot, and 30 are crowned with a wing-shaped plume called a T. When displayed during courtship, the feathers form a magnificent fan, where every eye spot and T are uniformly spaced and geometrically balanced to create a showcase of pattern, symmetry, precision, and design.
This bird is a living, breathing work of art. And when we move in close to the details, we see craftsmanship and planning and subtle engineering that's just utterly obvious.
The shape of every eye spot is defined by rows of multicolored branching strands called barbs. Moving closer, we see that each barb contains thousands of barbules, microscopic filaments tightly compacted along a rigid shaft. And the surface of each barbule is segmented into crystal-like bands of molecular jewelry. These barbules are reflective, so they glimmer and change color when struck by light from different angles.
The total effect of all this decoration provides an excellent example of what is known as gratuitous beauty. That's beauty that goes way beyond what's needed to attract a mate or to provide some other survival advantage. In other words, you have features that look like they're there for no other reason than to be gorgeous, to be beautiful, to be breathtaking.
In nature, gratuitous beauty is not limited to peacocks, for the animal and plant kingdoms are filled with striking visual displays that each evokes an obvious question. Is artistry of this magnitude actually possible through natural selection, a blind process devoid of foresight or purpose, that theoretically constructed every detail in every organism through a series of biological accidents, random errors in the genetic code?
No, because randomness by definition is going nowhere in particular. So the method of explanation, the tools of explanation that natural selection gives us are far too crude for what they need to explain. Give me an example of chaos and chance producing beauty, and I'll rethink it. But what I see chaos and chance producing is more chaos and chance.
To better grasp the artistic limitations of natural selection, consider the planning, imagination, and skill required to create one of the most famous paintings in history, Michelangelo's mural on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel.
Looking at the ceiling, you have a coherent story. There is a unifying thread of biblical themes that brings it all together. There are symmetries in the way that things have been painted and arranged. The use of the space, the way that figures stand at particular intervals in relation to each other. And you see exquisite brushwork over this enormous surface. Just this overflow of artistic genius. It's the antithesis of randomness. In the Sistine Chapel, randomness would be a bucket of paint accidentally kicked over and splattered on a wall. Or a bunch of stains, right? Flaking paint. The ceiling's coming down. We got to get Michelangelo in here to fix this mess. We have randomness and Michelangelo, and they are polar opposites.
Similar principles hold true in nature. If the random genetic mutations so essential to natural selection have no eye for blending colors or ability to formulate elegant patterns and shapes, then there must be some other agent responsible for the glorious petals of a lily and the ornate decorations on a butterfly's wing. A designer whose works far exceed the constraints of Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest.
What we see in beautiful systems are features that go beyond what's necessary for mere survival. So for me, ultimately, beauty points to design because in a biological context, beauty is an extra. It's an add-on. Beauty is there over and above what's needed just to make a go of it. Well, you start walking along that path, and it doesn't take very long until you realize you come to grips with the reality that there was a transcendent mind that put this universe together as we find it. What we have right in front of us, in the peacock, in tropical fish, in the eye of the eagle, in these exquisite designs that show not just engineering, but artistry, whimsy, humor, subtlety, all the features of a supreme intellect. And the final point, the one that really brings it home, is this idea of beauty, of a property that we perceive, that we understand, that we feel, that we respond to, that goes well beyond what living things need just to get by. That signal carries us beyond the world itself to a cause that's transcendent, to a cause that's divine. The world is designed. It's the only reasonable thing to infer from what we see.
So a fairly simple thought on all of that. But there's actually a number of scriptures. We're only going to look at a couple here. In Psalm 104, Lord, how many and varied are your works. In wisdom you've made them all, and the earth is full of your riches and your creatures. All of God's creation, it draws our eye to it and draws our thoughts to, there's something behind all of this. There's a whole heap greater than any of us. In Romans chapter 1, it says, ever since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and his divine nature, they have been clearly seen and being understood through his workmanship. It's all his creation and all those wonderful things he has made, so that they who fail to believe and trust in him are without excuse and without defence. There's a whole heap of other things that we could look at in the scriptures to do with these things, but just a simple thought there this morning for all the reasons that people might have that we can present to people and say, oh, well, why do we believe in God? Well, we believe in him because of what we see in the world. But of course, for all of us, the thing that's most beautiful is the fact that he gives us his Holy Spirit that we might know him, that we might know the one who's actually behind all of this creation. And we continue to wonder at it, we remain amazed at it, we become more and more thankful that the God who thought to create us, but then put all of the other things on the earth to help direct our thoughts towards him, oh well, we're going to be eternally thankful for that. Anyway, that's basically it for this morning. Thank you.